Ole Miss and Florida square off this weekend. Ole Miss coming off a bye. Florida coming off the win against LSU. Ole Miss had some struggles early, lost to LSU, lost to Kentucky, but have now rebounded. Trey Harris is expected to go in this game against Florida. Your thoughts going into this game in Ole Miss and Florida?
Yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of Florida fans that are going to try and use the transitive property to say that oh, maybe we can upset Ole Miss. We beat LSU and LSU beat Ole Miss. That's not going to happen in this game, Blake. One key thing stands out to me the most. We know how disruptive this Ole Miss front has been. 46 team sacks. They're number one in the country in havoc rate, which is the accumulation of sacks and tackles for loss per play. They're getting after everybody that they're going up against. While Florida has not allowed very many sacks, they have struggled in this category against opposing teams that have productive defensive lines. That's the major first thing I'm keen on as we break down this game, Blake. I don't trust Florida going up against a front seven that is beating the crap out of every single team that they've played.
I mean, most teams. Okay, that's fair. Most teams. I mean, they didn't have you said transitive property, and the only thing I can think is that Ole Miss didn't have a sack against LSU. But I mean, there does come that. Mm-hmm. Joe, I do think that there is an interesting part of this game. Number one, I don't think Florida's secondary is good at all. They got injuries in the back end. You get Trey Harris back. I do wonder how that addition, I mean, you would think getting a guy like Trey Harris back, who, by the way, who's been out for almost a month, give or take about a month in and out, he still leads the SEC in receiving yards, which is ridiculous. Him being back, how much of a boost is it for him?
Right.
But I do think you hit the nail on the head, just the wrong part of what I wanted to talk about. If Florida, I'm not going to say they're going to stop Ole Miss from getting to DJ Lagway. I don't think that can happen. However, when they do give him time, or if they give him time, this Ole Miss secondary can be beat. They're 82nd in the country in passing yards allowed. They do have an issue on the opposite side corner of Trey Amos. Joe and DJ Lagway can spin it. He 1,000% can spin it. Now, his accuracy is a bit of an issue. And I think that, as a young quarterback, you want to see it get better. I mean, he said at 50%. I mean, Joey's sitting around right at 55% in SEC play already this year. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have the attempts for that, but, I mean, he's still around 55%. Badger had a big game last week against LSU. I do think that Lagway can throw the ball a little bit on this Ole Miss team if given time. The big question, though, is obviously, does he get time? On the opposite side of that, though, Ole Miss, to our standard of what they've been under Lane Kiffin, have not been able to run the ball the way that they want to. This week they're going to, because after watching the game against LSU last week and seeing Florida over the last couple of weeks, Ole Miss is going to have the ability to line up and run it right over them, and I just don't think that they have enough defensively to stop this team. So where a lot of people are focusing on Ole Miss defense, Florida offense, it's the opposite for me. You get Trey Harris back. I don't think Florida can stop the run, and I think that that's going to be a very big issue.
You bring up DJ Lagway. We know that he has shown an ability to make big plays regardless of who the opponent is, and he had a number of nice throws against Georgia before he went down with the injury. So bringing that fold into this conversation is definitely important for the discussion, because if Florida does keep this close, can you convert on those big plays that DJ Lagway is able to produce, because he can stretch the field unlike any other quarterback in the SEC. His arm is that gifted. It's just a matter of the consistency of those connections. You mentioned he is at 58.5% on his completion percentage, so they have not completely been fulfilling those plays. The other part outside of what I brought up with the production from their defensive line, Trey Harris coming back, as you've brought up here, is super critical for this matchup. Mm-hmm. I think that Ole Miss is offense, which has been really freaking good over the past couple of weeks, is going to get even better now that Trey Harris is expected to return. We don't know the degree of health, because college football, we don't get fully fleshed out injury reports on guys like this. And,
I mean,
knowing
he's been
how
out for
actually,
a month, Joe.
Right, wait. I understand that he's been out for a while. Sometimes guys come back, whatever they're dealing with. It could be nagging more than we realize, and it could be something that's in their head. There's so many different complexities that go into a player being hurt. But I think him being the number one guy in receiving in the SEC right now, despite missing this stretch of time, is only going to help Jackson Dart and the passing attack get better. It's been huge that Jordan Watkins has stepped up the way that he has. Florida secondary is not great. Jason Marshall, I think, is an underrated player in that secondary. But outside of that, they are a very, very weak front, and they do not produce many pressures in a game like this to get after Jackson Dart. So I have no faith to believe that Florida is going to be built to slow down an offense that has been blowing past everybody.
Ole Miss saw that LSU ran mesh routes on Florida all game long. One quarterback is going to complete them, Jackson Dart. Garrett Nussmeier didn't. He did. I don't know if he didn't want to, if he didn't want to step up in the pocket, he got scared. I don't know. Joe, the book is out. And by the way, that's what Texas did. Texas converted on them. LSU did not. You're about to see mesh concepts all the live long day with Ole Miss. Joe, their secondary is horrendous. Their linebackers and covers are horrendous. LSU fumbled the bag. And I get that Florida fans want to, like, hey, man, we beat LSU. LSU found a way to lose that game. Now, I do think that Florida is better than what people give them credit for, Joe. I mean, again, this is going to be what, out of the last 9 opponents, this is their 7th-ranked opponent that they're facing. I mean, like, I don't think it's necessarily fair to Florida to say that they're a bad football team. They're just facing really good opponents.
One really quick note. I made a mistake. Jason Marshall is out. He has been banged up. I was wondering why I didn't see him when I was doing my notes in the previous game. So he has been out. Ignore my comment on Jason Marshall. So that explains. I mean, that obviously helps.
Oh, they're beat up everywhere. Well, they're beat up everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, they're beat up. They're beat up in a lot of places. Montrell Johnson did get a carry last week. I'm interested to see what his status may be. But look, man, there's a lot of momentum riding with Billy. They got some commits this week. They flipped some guys from Florida State. And listen, I'm going to say this. Momentum is a hell of a drug. It's a hell of a drug when you talk about college football. I'm not saying it's enough to beat Ole Miss, okay?
Yeah.
It's a hell of a drug, though. You make the announcement. Hold on one second. You make the announcement that Billy's coming back, you get skull drug. You beat LSU. You start flipping commits. You see that you have a bona fide quarterback. Joe, this team might come out and play a little bit more inspired than maybe that we thought that they would. By the way, they get one more win, they're going to a bowl game. So they got a lot to play for here just as much as Ole Miss does.
That is true, and I think it's necessary to bring up that Florida could play competitive in the beginning of this game. But if we're talking about momentum, I think Ole Miss is the most momentum. I know that they're coming off of a bye game, or a bye week rather. Them having a period of recovery after the performance that they put out there against Georgia, I think is only going to spark them even further. So I agree with you on momentum. I know that there is a little bit more of an injection of life into this Florida team than many people expected to this point in the year, and nobody thought that they were going to beat LSU. But man, Ole Miss is the team that is arguably the hottest in college football after that game against Georgia.
Don't say everybody. My entire week last week literally was, if you play around with Florida, they will beat you. And that's exactly what they did.
Right.
Again, look, momentum with 18 to 22-year-old kids can make them play above themselves. I do wonder this. In a team like Ole Miss that's been so good in their front seven, I've seen – so stay with me here. I've seen Florida go up against Georgia and be very physical. I've seen them go up against LSU and be very physical. Can they do it again? Joe, here's the thing that I love about this Florida team under Billy, and it doesn't get any credit. They ain't scared of nobody. Look, I'll give them that they're not the most talented. They're not, they're not the creme de la creme of where they want to be. They're not in the where their status is as a program overall, and where Spurrier and Urban and even Dan Mullen had them in the SEC championship game. But Joe, They ain't scared of nobody. And you know what? When you've gone up in this many games against this many high-ranked opponents, it's another week for them. It literally is another week for them. So I'm interested. Look, I'm taking Ole Miss to win. Yeah. I'm not going to take them to cover, mainly due to the fact that I just have a feeling that momentum just always plays a massive factor in games like this. So we'll see how this one plays out.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.